From Krypton to Metropolis. Years ago, out in space, far beyond our own solar system, the giant planet Krypton circled around a huge red sun. Many times larger than Earth, this scientifically advanced world had existed for untold ages. Few Kryptonians believed anything could threaten their peaceful lives. But deep within the core of Krypton, natural forces were at work which would soon doom the thriving planet. One man knew the fate that awaited Krypton. He was Jor-El, that world's greatest scientist and a member of the ruling Science Council. But knowing the truth was not enough. He still had to convince the unbelieving people of his home world. This was Jor-El's mission on that fateful morning as he walked through the streets of the great city of Kryptonopolis. One thought rang through his mind.
This time I must convince the council members of the truth. They have scoffed at me before. This is my last chance. If I fail again, it will be too late for us all.
That rumbling sound, it must be another quake.
It was distant at first, but it soon grew louder and louder until the ground began to shudder with a quaking that threw many citizens off their feet. The buildings swayed and the streets seemed to groan as they cracked apart. Then, as swiftly as it had begun, the tremor passed. Jor-El looked around to see if any of the people who had fallen needed help. No one seemed badly hurt, but the condition of the once beautiful buildings was getting worse each time the tremor struck. Jor-El frowned and quickened his pace, a fierce glint of determination in his noble eyes. Moments later, Jor-El stood in the great council chamber, ready to address its members. Almost breathless from his haste, he still found the power to speak out in a loud, ringing voice.
Our only hope is to build a fleet of giant space arcs to carry us safely to another world. I have searched through my star chart and have found a planet called Earth. Its yellow sun and lesser gravity will give us all powers beyond imagining. We could become a race of Supermen.
As Jor-El spoke of Krypton's doom, the members of the council grew angrier and angrier. Finally, the council leader would hear no more. He rose to his feet and shouted down at Jor-El.
We have heard enough of your nonsense. You disgrace your position on the council with your prophecies of doom. We have found no proof of your wild theory. Yours are simply the ravings of a madman.
Satisfied with his rejection of Jor-El's theory, the council leader returned to his seat. Now, barely able to contain his anger, Jor-El made his final plea to the unheeding council.
You will have your proof, but by then it will be too late. The planet itself will have exploded from beneath our very feet.
With that, Jor-El turned and stalked out of the chamber, his face a mixture of frustration and sorrow. After a time, he turned his steps homeward to tell Lara, his wife, of his failure. To think that a handful of foolish men could condemn a whole planet to a fiery doom. While he spoke, she listened calmly. In her arms, their little son, Kal-El, cooed happily.
Why won't they listen to me?
He asked her.
You've done your best to save them. Since they refuse to accept the truth, at least you can finish building your ship to take some of us to safety.
At that instant, another shock hit the city, this one greater than any before. Jor-El's worst fears had come to pass. The end was approaching, and only a small model of his planned spaceship was ready to be launched.
Hurry, Lara. Put little Kal-El in the ship. Even if we can't save ourselves, we can save our son. Quickly! We have only seconds left.
With the baby securely strapped inside the ship, Jor-El pressed the ignition button that sent it hurtling into space. With tears in his eyes, Jor-El spoke.
In a short time, our son will reach the planet Earth. There, he will grow to be mightier than any other being. Let us hope he learns to use his powers wisely for the good of all. On Earth, our son will be a Superman.
Even as Jor-El spoke, his warning to the people of Krypton was fulfilled. With an awesome roar, Krypton exploded. But, safe within the space vessel, wrapped in blankets of blue, red, and yellow, the last son of Krypton could not hear the sounds. Little Kal-El was too young to realize his world was no more. Time went by. The small ship passed into another solar system, one with a yellow sun around which several planets revolved. The ship headed directly for the third planet, a world of blue oceans, green vegetation, and great banks of fleecy clouds. The spaceship and its superhuman cargo knifed down through the clouds toward a field outside a town called Smallville in the United States of America. Driving along a country road in their pickup truck, Jonathan and Martha Kent were enjoying a pleasant June day when a roaring sound overhead caught Ma Kent's attention. Looking up, she gasped as she saw a strange red and blue object coming down from the sky.
Pull over, Jonathan. I don't know what that thing is, but we better stop and see. No telling where it came from.
Even as the farmer brought his truck to a screeching stop, the spaceship struck the ground, plowing deeply into the field before coming to a grinding halt. Timidly, the Kents decided to investigate. Leaving their truck, they slowly edged toward the deep gorge made by the rocket. They were amazed. The spacecraft was unharmed, but the canopy had sprung open, and something inside had been thrown out. A baby. Little Kal-El sat on the ground, smiling. Ma Kent gasped.
He's adorable. Look, he's sifting sand through his fingers.
She was wrong. He was crushing rocks with his bare hands. Ma Kent picked up the child.
Oh, Jonathan, we've wanted a baby for so long. Can't we keep him?
Not if anyone knew how he got him. Why, Martha, that thing he was in could have come from another planet for all we know. We'd better hide that rocket and take this abandoned youngster to the local orphanage. You can bet they won't be able to find his family. When they put him up for adoption, we'll be first in line.
Several days later, the director of the Smallville orphanage ushered the Kents into his office. The director felt relieved and thought to himself,
If they want to adopt that baby, it's okay with me. If I didn't know better, I'd swear that child had some kind of strange powers. Well, these folks can worry about that now.
Had he or the Kents looked out the window at that moment, they would have seen Kal-El in a swing, going all the way around the bar in a complete circle. Not once, but many times. And that was not all. Only the toddlers knew their playmate had now lifted the little merry-go-round they were riding and was twirling it about, giving them a truly super ride. Meanwhile, the orphanage director made his decision.
Mr. and Mrs. Kent, your application seems in order. You understand we generally prefer younger adoptive parents. However, in your case, we are willing to make an exception. You have our approval.
To himself, he added,
Anything that makes my job easier. I still can't understand why the doctor couldn't vaccinate him. He claims the needle broke.
As the couple joyfully carried the new addition to their family from the orphanage, Jonathan said,
We'll name him after your family, Martha. The Clarks. You hear that, baby?
Ma Kent added,
From now on, your name is Clark Kent.
Kal-El didn't quite understand, though already he was picking up some English words. Within a week, he'd be able to talk pretty well. He had a super brain. As he looked back at the sign hanging over the orphanage gate, Clark accidentally turned on his heat vision. The invisible beams from his eyes cut through the chain that held up the sign. It fell on the director's head.
I knew it. That kid is a jinx.
He muttered to himself. The Kent farm was like nothing Clark had ever seen before. On Krypton, farming was done by robots, and his family had lived in the capital city. He loved the earth animals and the wide fields that gave him room to run and play. The towering buildings of Kryptonopolis could never provide this kind of open space. But one day, as Pa Kent plowed his field, he was horrified to see Clark chase a ball right into the path of the powerful tractor. There was no time to stop. A moment later, Pa Kent jumped from the wrecked tractor, which had been crushed by the impact with the boy's body. Clark seemed unaware of what had happened. His playsuit was ripped, but he had not been scratched. Day by day, Clark showed his parents what an unusual child he was. Once, Pa Kent needed to bring the cows from the pasture, and Clark decided to help by carrying a full-grown cow above his head.
Drat. I'm out of matches,
Pa Kent said. Clark decided to use another power he had perfected. Staring at the pipe, he sent out infrared rays from his eyes. Within seconds, Pa Kent was smoking contentedly, his pipe lit by his son's heat vision. One afternoon, the farmhands didn't finish stacking the hay. Imitating them, Clark completed the job in a few minutes. At least half a day's work for 3 men, and Clark wasn't even out of breath.
A flat tire. I'll have to jack up the rear of the truck.
Pa Kent could go no further. Little Clark calmly lifted the back end of the pickup and held it while his astonished father changed the tire.
I should have had this cake in the oven an hour ago. It'll be late for the hospital cake sale.
Ma Kent sighed. Clark turned on his heat vision, and she gasped as she saw him bake the cake in moments, using only his eyes. The Kents had an old-fashioned wood-burning stove in the farmhouse. As winter approached, Pa Kent declared,
I'll have to lay in a supply of firewood.
Clark watched to see how it was done, and then split enough wood to last 3 months in a matter of minutes.
Fire!
Jonathan's cry rang out through the house. Swiftly, Clark followed his father up to the attic, not even bothering with the ladder. Instead, he actually flew. The boy knew how to put out the fire. One puff of super breath came from his lips, and a blast of wind tore through the attic, instantly extinguishing the flames. Pa Kent was utterly speechless, not only because of his son's deed, but because of something else he noticed.
Look, Martha. The blankets we found Clark wrapped in were right in the middle of the fire. But they weren't even scorched. I can't tear them either.
Pa Kent tried to cut the blankets with scissors and couldn't. He then tried to pierce them with a pitchfork. The blankets were indestructible.
At last.
Ma Kent said with relief.
Our super baby wears out playsuits so fast I have a hard time keeping him dressed. But now I can make clothes that will last. Out of these blankets.
Pa Kent smiled.
How do you make anything out of cloth you can't cut?
Ma Kent had a plan. She unraveled the blankets and knitted them into a wear-proof playsuit. Whenever the threads needed cutting, Clark did the job with his heat vision. Several years later, Ma Kent unraveled her son's playsuit. Adding more threads from the blanket, she made an altogether different costume. The blue shirt and red cape bore a distinctive S emblem that one day would be known the world over. When the boy was 8 years old, the Kents sold the farm and moved into Smallville, where they opened a general store. By the time Clark started school, he had established a special image. He wore glasses and was known as a meek, mild boy who wasn't very good in sports. There was a reason for this. He had to be certain that no one would recognize him when he was ready to start his career as Superboy. Imagine the amazement of the people of Smallville when they saw this brightly clad boy flying over their town. At first, some were unable to believe their eyes. Others regarded the airborne lad with suspicion. But soon they all learned to welcome the youthful figure patrolling the sky. And why not? Stopping crime and saving lives became part of the heroic boy's daily routine. There were some, however, who failed to cheer Superboy's appearances. They were criminals, and they came to both hate and fear the Boy of Steel. As one put it,
"At least you have a chance when you're fighting a cop. But how do you fight a kid with a hide so tough? Bullets bounce off it like they were made of rubber."
One day, a bridge collapsed as a school bus started across it. The vehicle began its plunge to seemingly certain doom. Superboy zoomed in and caught. The people were off, but to Superboy, it was nothing. Thanks to his great strength, the bus seemed no heavier than a feather. But, important as these feats were, no deed was too small for the boy of tomorrow. Rescuing a kitten caught in a tree was as much a part of his day's work as capturing bank robbers.
Nice kitty.
Sometimes Smallville did not offer enough emergencies to fill his free time. He flew east to the Atlantic Ocean to save a tugboat sinking in a raging storm. On the small vessel, the grateful crew waved their hats and cheered. Soon, Superboy was honored by people of many countries who marveled at this youngster who did the impossible and who could not be harmed by anything. Well, there was one thing. When Krypton exploded, its fragments were turned into a glowing element called kryptonite. Its radioactive rays could weaken Superboy, and exposure to kryptonite for too long a time would kill him. One particular day, a kryptonite meteor fell to Earth near him. Overcome by the green radiation, the Boy of Steel sank to the ground. It seemed that nothing could save him. And then...
Don't worry, Superboy. I'll help you.
The Boy of Steel looked to see Lex Luthor, who was new in town. Luthor pushed the meteor into the river where it could no longer harm Superboy. He was aware that Lex Luthor had a reputation as a brilliant young scientist. Superboy could not know that Luthor, who had just saved his life, would soon become a bitter enemy. As soon as he regained his strength, Superboy spoke to Lex.
You rescued me from certain death. What can I do to repay you?
Not a thing, except maybe be my friend. I'm your biggest fan. Someday I hope to do as much good with my scientific work as you have with your powers.
Superboy brightened. He knew what to do.
Suppose I help you get started on that now. I'm going to build you a laboratory.
Wow!
Superboy moved so swiftly that it seemed to Lex there was a whole crew of boys in blue collecting materials, building, and painting. In a short time, the modern laboratory was complete. It only needed the chemicals for Lex to work with. Superboy gathered these rapidly from on and under the Earth, and even from outer space. From that day on, while other boys played, Lex Luthor worked in his lab. Yet, Lex did not consider it work because he enjoyed it so much. The most difficult tasks, which would have dismayed many famous scientists, were enthusiastically tackled by Lex. One quest in particular drove him on.
I must find a way to protect Superboy from kryptonite.
After many experiments, Lex determined that the first step in creating such a cure was to create a new life form. If life existed, it could be created. If it could be created, Lex could create it. He was that sure of himself. And at long last, he succeeded. It was a mere lump of jelly-like substance, but it unmistakably moved with the spark of life. Lex swelled with pride at this.
Success! I am the greatest scientist who ever lived!
He was so overjoyed that he became careless. As he flung out his arms in excitement, he struck some chemicals and equipment, knocking them to the floor. A fire started, and within moments the lab was a roaring furnace. Superboy was patrolling across the town when he smelled smoke. The next moment, he was flying directly to the source. He was shocked to find where it came from.
Holy smoke! Lex's lab! I have to put out the fire quickly or Lex is done for!
As he landed, the Boy of Steel drew in a mighty breath, then let loose a powerful burst of carbon dioxide. The blast immediately extinguished the blazing inferno as though it were a candle. In seconds, the last spark flickered out.
Have I arrived in time? I hope Lex hasn't been harmed by the flames.
Superboy examined the lab with his X-ray vision. A gasp escaped from his lips. Lex had not been burned, but strands of hair were falling from his head. Within moments, he would be completely bald. Luthor scowled.
You knocked over my experiment with your super breath. My great discovery is destroyed. I can never duplicate it. You did this on purpose.
I swear it isn't so. I blew out the fire to save your life.
You knew that my discovery would make me more famous than you, so you deliberately ruined it. From now on, we're enemies. I won't rest until the world has seen the last of Superboy.
And so Lex Luthor turned from good works to a life of crime. The years passed, and when Clark graduated from high school, he set his sights toward the future.
I've perfected my powers. I'm a full-fledged superhero now. I'd be able to do more good in a large city.
And so he boarded the bus from Metropolis to attend the university there. He majored in journalism because word of crime and disaster often reaches a newspaper office first, making it a perfect place to learn where he'd be needed most. During the second of his 4 years in college, Superboy gained a new name. Now he was Superman! When he finished college, it was time to find a newspaper job. Which paper should he pick? He chose the Daily Planet. Editor Perry White liked the look of Clark Kent. He was rather meek and mild-mannered, yet Perry felt that this young man could make a first-class reporter.
All right, Kent, you're hired. I'm a tough boss, and I demand that a reporter do his job and meet his deadlines. If you do that, we'll get along fine. Now, let me introduce you to some people.
The two walked into the Daily Planet's bustling newsroom.
Clark, I'd like you to meet our star reporter, Lois Lane.
Clark sensed that there was something dynamic about this attractive young woman. But there was something more, a look of independence and determination that had undoubtedly helped her become a top reporter at a very young age. Clark was not usually one to make snap judgments, but he knew at once that he liked Lois. Perry White was soon congratulating Clark for a long string of scoops. Only Clark came close to matching Lois and getting Superman stories. As Clark's reputation grew, the two reporters became friendly rivals. One morning, as Clark was about to leave on an assignment, the building began to tremble. An earthquake. Clark turned from the elevator and quickly made his way to the storeroom. No one else was in there. Swiftly, he shed his suit, revealing the colorful costume of Superman! A moment later, the famed red and blue-clad figure sprang through a window and flew out over the city. Below, he saw streets cracking so violently that parked cars were disappearing into crevices. One or two small buildings were already in ruins, and many large ones were seriously damaged. People were milling about in confusion, searching for shelter. Before anyone was seriously hurt, the first task was to find out what caused the quake and stop it. And that was certainly a job for Superman! Directing his amazing X-ray vision beneath the ground, Superman spotted the source of the problem. Something had turned the bedrock beneath the city into a swirling pool of molten lava. Diving down with lightning speed, he crashed into the ground and drilled through the rock and soil. In seconds, he had reached the liquid stone. A blast of frigid Arctic air streamed forth from the Man of Steel's lips. In seconds, the lava cooled and hardened back to normal. The threat was ended. It had certainly been a strange disaster, but no stranger than the tornado which struck the countryside near Metropolis the very next day. Even as the Man of Might flew toward it, he saw the rumbling twister rip into a barn, reducing the building to splintered boards which were thrown out in all directions. The possibility of a tornado occurring in this part of the country was remote, and during the season, it was considered impossible. Finding the cause would have to wait until the tornado itself was wiped out. Stopping a tornado was nothing new for Superman. He had done it many times before. He flew into the funnel, then began flying against the twister's howling wind. Faster and faster he flew, circling at incredible speed. Finally, the counter wind he had whipped up exactly matched that of the tornado. The two canceled each other out. The tornado soon broke up and vanished. In a car below, Lois Lane was photographing the whole thing for the Daily Planet.
Stop, Superman. Listen carefully. I have a message for you.
Superman could not mistake that voice, for he had heard it often through the years since that fateful day in Smallville. It was Lex Luthor, his arch-enemy. Turning, the Man of Steel saw a projected image of Luthor's face. It came from a small device that hovered in the air. Another of Luthor's brilliant inventions. And as usual, it was used both for crime and for revenge against Superman. The voice went on.
I caused the disaster that struck Metropolis, and they will continue until your city is reduced to rubble.
The airborne projector began to fly away, and Superman followed. Lois Lane was getting it all on film.
This is front-page material,
she thought. So intent was the girl reporter that she failed to hear the clanking footsteps behind her. With a sudden swiftness, a metal hand clamped over her mouth, while another hand imprisoned Lois's arm. She was unable to break free or call out to Superman for help. The Man of Tomorrow had already flown too far away to notice her predicament. Flying over Metropolis Harbor the next day, Superman saw an incredible sight. An enormous iceberg towering to skyscraper heights above the water. Even Superman was baffled by the appearance of an iceberg this far south. The boats and ships in the harbor were clearly in danger. Superman hurtled towards the icy menace, but was stopped short by a harsh voice.
Wait, Superman. Don't smash that iceberg until you hear me out.
Luthor again. I was certain this had to be your work.
The radioed voice of the villain made the projected face seem to speak.
Who else had the genius to do this, Superman? But I advise you not to try smashing the iceberg until you have carefully looked inside with your X-ray vision.
Twin X-ray beams flashed down from the Man of Steel's eyes, stabbing through the thick ice until they reached an air bubble. Inside, Lois Lane was sealed, imprisoned there by Lex Luthor. The evil voice continued.
Smash the iceberg, and she will be crushed. Use your heat vision to melt it, and she will drown.
Superman turned angrily toward the mocking image.
This time you've gone too far, Luthor. I swear I'll catch you, and when I do...
So great was Superman's rage that he failed to realize how close the iceberg was drifting towards the great Metropolis Narrows Bridge. Nor did he notice a flying figure approaching from behind. A man propelled through the air by rockets attached to his bizarre costume. It was none other than Lex Luthor. This time, in person. The next instant, Luthor seized the Man of Steel. It seemed to be an act of sheer insanity. Surely no mere Earthman could hope to match Superman in hand-to-hand combat. But, impossible as it seemed, Luthor was gaining the upper hand. The green glow surrounding Luthor's costume, combined with the pain and weakness Superman was feeling, told the story. Luthor's costume was covered with kryptonite. Once Luthor had saved Superboy from it. Now the evil scientist was determined to kill the grown Superman with kryptonite. Gathering every bit of his waning strength for one last effort, Superman flung his attacker into the sky. Then, with the kryptonite at a safe distance, he turned and flew off in the opposite direction. Luthor grinned as he saw the fleeing figure.
You can't escape me, Superman! I've already weakened you too much! I can see you can't fly at super speed, so I'll easily catch up with you and destroy you!
Superman kept flying, but he turned his head to gaze intently at his pursuing enemy. Luthor stared at the face, hoping to see the fear he felt certain he had inspired in the Man of Steel's heart. Superman's eyes showed nothing of the kind. He was staring at Luthor's costume, and the expression on the Man of Steel's face looked triumphant. Only then did it dawn on Luthor what was happening to him. Superman was looking back so he could train his heat vision on Luthor's costume and burn away all the kryptonite. Luthor's weapon was gone.
What?
But that was not all. With the deadly green mineral gone, Superman shifted his heat beams to the rockets which flew Luthor through the air. They were melting, and without them, Luthor was already starting to fall. Panic gripped him as he looked below. Hitting the waters of the bay from such a great height would be dangerous enough. But looming directly under him, Luthor saw the broad metal span of the Metropolis Narrows Bridge.
Relax, Luthor. You know I'd never kill anyone, not even a man as evil as you.
With scant inches to spare, the Man of Tomorrow caught the plummeting form of the criminal scientist. Luthor looked up at Superman.
I was afraid you'd be too weak to get here in time.
No such luck, Luthor. I was only flying slowly so I could lure you after me and use my heat vision on you. Besides, if I let you hit the bridge, think of the traffic jam you might cause.
I never did like your humor, Superman.
A police car happened to be on the bridge. The team of officers who manned it hurried to take charge of Superman's prisoner. They were only too happy to do this, since it would mean that they'd be arresting the famous Lex Luthor, #1 on the FBI's most wanted list. Superman smiled at Luthor.
These gentlemen will see to it that you get back to your cell in Metropolis prison. I'd fly her there myself, but I have some unfinished business to take care of.
As the police car sped away, the voice of the evil mastermind cut through the wail of the sirens.
We'll meet again, Superman.
The menacing iceberg had almost reached the busy bridge. Another few moments and the mighty steel span would be struck and crushed. Its cables would snap like threads and the bridge would buckle and collapse into the river below. Superman knew he had to act quickly, and yet Lois was still in the iceberg. How could he destroy it without harming her? He flew to the top of the mountain of ice and yelled. But this was no ordinary yell. The sound that burst from Superman's lips was a super shout so incredibly loud, the people on the bridge clapped their hands over their ears. The sound echoed throughout Metropolis. But the main thrust of the sound wave was directed at the iceberg. It ripped through the glacial mass, shattering it into small fragments. Heard the shout and the rumbling of breaking ice. She saw the broken chunks start to fall towards her even as the icy floor under her feet began to crack and give way. It looked like the end of the courageous reporter. But Superman had not acted without first figuring out everything. The instant the shout left his lips, he went into super speed motion, hurtling himself into the crumbling iceberg so swiftly that he reached Lois before a single fragment of the ice could strike her. Superman smiled tenderly at the brave reporter in his arms. He could feel her shivering from her ordeal, but he marveled at her courage.
Sorry it took me so long to get you out of that iceberg, Lois, but I had some pressing matters to attend to.
No problem, Superman.
A smiling Lois said through chattering teeth.
Right now, your presence is positively warming.
Superman flew towards the docks where a crowd of cheering spectators had gathered. Lois decided not to insist that he take her all the way to the Daily Planet offices.
You can drop me off here. I can hardly wait to see Perry's face when I come in with this scoop.
A short time later, Lois reached the Daily Planet city room. Perry White was standing in the doorway of his office when she came in. Lois hurried toward him, gasping.
Perry, have I got a story? I've been kidnapped by Luthor, sealed in an iceberg,
and rescued by Superman when he shattered that iceberg with his super voice.
What?
Lois was stunned.
How could you possibly know that?
Clark was here 20 minutes ago with the whole story.
Perry answered.
It's already gone to press, but we still want your first-hand account for the next edition.
Lois turned to glare at Clark Kent. She didn't say a word, but she was thinking plenty.
How could he have reached the planet ahead of me? I caught a cab as soon as Superman left. Even if Clark did happen to be on the scene to get the story, how did he manage to get here 20 minutes ahead of me? Unless Superman picked him up and carried him here. Or if Clark Kent actually was... No, that's absurd.
Clark suspected what Lois was thinking and smiled knowingly.